Hello everyone, in today's video I'll be talking about Candyman from 1992. Since we recently lost Tony Todd, this will be a small tribute for him by talking about Candyman. Let me tell you, anytime someone like Tony Todd or any other legendary horror actor or legendary actors in general pass away, I get sad. I also say to myself, what better way to honor and pay tribute to this legend by watching the movie and doing a video on it. Candyman was written and directed by Bernard Rose, produced by Clive Barker. It's based on the short story The Forbidden, written by Clive Barker, which was published in his Books of Blood anthology book series. It's in the Volume 5 Book of Blood series. When it was released here in the US, it was published in the Flesh. I'm not gonna lie, I'll admit, as someone who loves Clive Barker and has read his books, I have not read the short story based on this movie. Also, I met the guy this past year for a photo op at Monster Mania this past summer. Having not read the short story, my friends have told me, of course, the book is way different than the movie, and this is another example of changing the book to the movie done well, and it worked out alright. In the short story, Candyman is not black. His background story is unknown. Also, the story takes place in Liverpool, London, whereas this movie takes place in Cabrini Green, Chicago. I'm not an expert on geography, and I've never been to Chicago or Liverpool, London. I understand these places are poor, bad places with high crime rates and poverty. I don't know why I was not sure how true this was until I did a little research. I thought that Clive Barker was originally going to direct this movie, but I did not find any evidence that he was originally going to direct Candyman. But what I did find was that Bernard Rose met and told Clive Barker that he was interested. He wanted to adapt the short story The Forbidden into a movie, and Clive Barker helped him finance the movie. But my friend Christian told me that if Clive Barker did direct this movie, he would have been more true to the short story, and Lord knows who else would have played Candyman instead of Tony Todd. Candyman is a movie I've gone back on more views and research how this movie has a lot more meaning behind it than what people realize. Anytime I've gone back to rewatch this movie, I always notice something different about it compared to my first viewing. This is my second Clive Barker adaptation I saw after viewing Hellraiser, but I was still not aware about who Clive Barker was at the time, and I was a big iconic horror writer legend. This movie and Hellraiser is what made me a fan of his work, and as I said before, I met the man this past year at Monster Mania. Compared to Hellraiser, it's hard for me to pick one that I really love. I'm basically on a neutral level, but I understand and respect some people prefer Hellraiser or Candyman, or one or the other. Me, I'm in the neutral zone, loving both movies equally on a different level. This is the first time I learned about the urban legend of saying Candyman 5 times in the mirror and you die. I'll admit, after hearing that, I never attempted to try that. No way. I stay away from that stuff. I'm not sure how many stories there are about people who attempted to do that as a test to see whether or not they would live or die. This movie is very well acted, has amazing performances in a horror movie ever. Candyman was an African-American slave who was killed for falling in love with the plantation's villager's daughter, who was a white woman, and he got her pregnant. The girl's father hired a mob to go after him. They captured, tortured, and killed Candyman. They cut off his hand, covered his body in honey, and he was stung to death by bees. He comes back as a ghost. Candyman is a sad, tragic character who was misunderstood. He was the victim of a hate crime, and it was cruel what the villagers did to him. Despite he was a murdered ghost, and yet you felt sympathy for the guy. He became a monster because of the horrible crime that was committed against him. Tony Todd's dialogue as Candyman is very poetic and romantic in a weird, strange way. All he wanted to do was reincarnate the woman that he loved and fall in love with her all over again. He's like Boris Karloff in The Mummy. His underground lair is like Eric from Phantom of the Opera. Having said that, Tony Todd did say that he did base Candyman being inspired from Lon Chaney Sr.'s Phantom of the Opera. Tony Todd's voice as Candyman is very iconic and creepy, just like Freddy Krueger. But unlike Freddy Krueger, he was guilty of his crime they did commit, whereas Candyman was innocent. He's very hypnotic in the movie, just like Dracula. Even though it's only a movie, his hypnotic voice is so believable, you feel like you're being hypnotized and put in a trance state. I like his first scene in the parking lot garage when he first meets Helen. Little advice, run away and get as far away you can from Candyman. Great introduction for a horror villain. The scenes when Candyman's voice seduces Helen are shot very well. I read that Bernard Rose supposedly hypnotized Virginia Madsen for those scenes. When Candyman and Helen dance like in a ballroom dance, it's like Beauty and the Beast. I read that both Tony Todd and Virginia Madsen took dance lessons for this scene. This movie's a little bit like The Shining in it, because this movie is psychological, not knowing if Candyman committed these crimes or not, or is it all in Helen's head. When Helen finds Candyman sleeping when she's about to kill him, it's like Dracula when Van Helsing stabs Dracula, but Candyman wakes up and stops Helen, attempting to kill him. People's belief in Candyman what keeps him alive. The urban legend is what gives him power. Here's a story how I met Tony Todd, but actually, in 2014 when I went to Monster Mania, I saw Tony Todd, but I did not meet him, because at that time they were doing a Crow 20-year anniversary celebration. Fast forward 2 years later in 2016, I finally met the guy, but before meeting him, when I was waiting in line, he had to go on a lunch break, so after that, when he went on his lunch break, I was in the hallway walking around, I ran to Tony Todd, I said, "Hey Tony, what's up?" And he said, "What's going on, my man?" He gave me a pat in the back. How awesome is that? Candyman gave me a pat in the back. When he came back from his lunch break, I went back in line to finally meet him, and when I finally met him, I shook his hand, I said, "Hi, nice to meet you, I'm a big fan." And when I asked how much for an autograph and a photo, his the money, whatever they call those people, the money guy was Tony was joking, X amount if you're a Yankee fan, X amount if you're a Red Sox fan. I don't remember the exact price, but you get the point of the idea. Besides talking about his movies, we talked a little baseball, because he told me he was a Yankee fan, that I was a Yankee fan too myself. And that was 2016. At that time, Aaron Judge was not even in the majors. He was still in the minors. But Aaron Judge made his major league debut later that year in 2016. But anyway, besides the point, we talked about Candyman. We talked about also his other films. I talked about The Crow with him, how that's one of my favorite movies. He told me about the sad, tragic death of Brandon Lee during the making of that film, how sad it was to lose Brandon Lee. And also, I talked about how I liked him on an episode of Smallville that I liked called Jitters, where he played this character, Earl Jenkins, who worked at Luther Corp. He had an accident, and this accident caused it where his body just shakes rapidly, and the disease gets worse and worse. He's basically another sad, tragic, misunderstood Superman villain character. Really good episode. Highly recommend that episode. And before he worked for Luther Corp, he basically knew the kids because he used to work for them, and he taught Clark how to play guitar and stuff. He was basically an uncle to Clark. This was the autograph that he signed for me. I'm not gonna lie, this is not from the first Candyman movie. This is from one of the Candyman sequels, but sadly when I met him, he was out of pictures of the first Candyman movie. I'm honestly not sure which Candyman sequel this is, to be honest. And sadly, if I had known, I would have gotten to sign my Blu-ray copy. But all in all, nice guy. And also, after talking about Candyman the Crow, he told me that he was in the Night of the Living Dead remake as Ben, because at that time I had seen the original Night of the Living Dead, and I was not aware of the remake at that time. And I told him, I can see in my head as Ben, the Night of the Living Dead remake, which he was. Well, the Night of the Living Dead is not a great remake, but he was the one good part of that movie where he played a good part of Ben. Basically what I'm saying is that he was basically my point is, he did a good job playing Ben in the remake. That's my point. And after when I was just about done meeting him, I said, "Can you do the Candyman voice?" He did the Candyman voice for me. It was awesome, epic, and legendary. Thank you, Tony Todd, for doing the Candyman voice for me. When I also met Tony Todd, I asked him when he was stung by the bees in Candyman, was he allergic? He said no, but he said it hurt. It was not fun. I can only imagine. I've been stung by bees twice as a kid. I'm not allergic, but that was a long time ago. I'm not taking the risk of getting stung by a bee today. For what I read, he was stung 23 times. Each bee sting was $1,000, and he got paid a total of $23,000. Let me tell you, if Hollywood told me to do a scene with real bees, no thank you, no matter how good the money is. Unlike Tony Todd, who was not allergic to bees, his co-star Virginia Madsen was allergic to bees, and they had a lot of EpiPen auto-injector on set. Real trooper and a risk taker, I'll give her that credit. Believe it or not, before Tony Todd got the part of playing Candyman, they originally wanted Eddie Murphy for the part. As much as I like Eddie Murphy, I don't see him as the role of Candyman, unless they wanted to make a parody, Lollipop Man. The reason why he was turned down was because he was asking for too much money, the studio could not afford him, and they wanted someone tall for the part. Tony Todd was perfect casting choice. Just like they say, Robert Englund is Freddy Krueger, Tony Todd is Candyman. Virginia Madsen plays Helen, who's working on a thesis paper for her master's degree. She's an educated woman, comes from high class. Despite all this, we see how because she's a woman, she gets judged, looked down upon. Want to know the story and urban legend on Candyman? She had a fascination with the legend of Candyman. Despite she did not believe in the urban legend, she was based on the skeptical side. She starts to believe in Candyman is real when she comes across him, and how Candyman frames her for a crime she did not commit, and being accused of murder and child abduction. Her whole life is falling apart because of Candyman. We see her become intimidated and go batshit crazy. As it turns out, she was the reincarnation of Candyman's lover. Virginia Madsen does a great job in this movie. She's great and fantastic. One of the best horror female performances in a horror movie ever. Very invested in this character from start to finish. It has a good shot like of Helen taking photos, and we see a graffiti spray paint of Candyman, and she's inside the mouth. Other than this movie, I really haven't seen a lot of other Virginia Madsen's other movies. And yes, I know who her brother is. Michael Madsen from Reservoir Dogs and Free Willy. You see how she has a lot of bad luck in this movie, her character. She's very heroic and sacrifices her life saving the baby's life. Saving that baby shows how good of a person she is. Despite saving the baby's life, she dies from third-degree burns. I met her once at Monster Mania. She was very nice. But sadly, I don't have a photo meeting her. Sorry. The actress who played Helen's friend Bernadette, who might recognize as Clarice Starling's friend from Silence of the Lambs, also does a good job in this movie. When her and Helen are trying to say Candyman in the mirror, she's too scared and shaken to say it 5 times. When her friend Helen is falsely accused of the crime she did not commit, like any good friend, she supports or believes Helen did not commit these crimes. It's sad how she died being killed by Candyman, and Candyman frames Helen for the police believing that she killed her best friend. Sam Raimi's brother Ted Raimi has a small part in this movie at the beginning of the film. Some people debate on the opening murder story did not happen, that it was just an urban legend. Vanessa E. Williams plays Annie Marie McCoy. She's one of the residents at Cabrini Green. She's the mother of the child Candyman abducts. The scene where she finds her baby is missing, very terrifying, convincing, and very believable. The one thing I learned about Candyman abducting the baby that was interesting how people interpret is that the baby is looked at as a symbol of a lost child that Candyman never had. That Candyman's baby was aborted. My guess is this baby could be the reincarnation baby that died from abortion. Not only does Candyman want the woman that he was in love with, he wants his baby, his whole family back together as a whole. Also, before her baby's kidnapping, she explains to Helen and Bernadette, despite where she lives, she explains that we're not all alike. We're just trying to live, survive, and she's trying to live her life and raise her baby, hoping that one day he'll grow, become someone special, and be successful, and get far away from Cabrini Green. She doesn't do drugs, does not have any weapons. Despite having the same name, she is not related to singer-actress Vanessa Williams. The kid actor who plays Jake was very good in this movie. Typical little kid. It's not explained where his parents are. My guess is that he was a homeless kid. By the end of the movie, we see him by Annie Marie's side. Well, it's not her son. My guess is she either adopted him or just checks up on him and raises him like a son. But I know, I'm overthinking this. Xander Berkeley plays Trevor Lyle, Helen's husband, who you all might recognize as John Connor's jerk stepdad Todd in Terminator 2 Judgment Day. His character is an asshole in this movie. He's a dirtbag. A college professor jerk looks down upon his student, thinking he's a superior, better than everyone else. He's not a good person. He cheated on Helen, one of his students. Despite cheating on Helen, he felt bad in the end after she died. He was heartbroken. Trevor feels big guilt over his shoulders for cheating on Helen. The movie ends with him saying his ex-wife's name 5 times in the mirror, Helen. Helen kills Trevor. It ends where she might be the new urban legend. When you think about it, it was also revenge for Helen. Besides the way Trevor treats Helen, his college professor Purcell is so condescending towards Helen and her friend Bernadette because they're women and they're treated as second-class citizens. Anytime I watch the restaurant dinner scene, I'm like, this guy's a complete jerk. Besides great acting and story, it's great beautiful cinematography and a very good music score by Philip Glass, one of my all-time favorite horror movie soundtracks. As I said before, this movie was shot in Cabrini Green, Chicago. Believe it or not, some of the actors in this movie were not actors. They were actually real-life gang members that Bernard Rose found in the street and asked them to be in the movie. During this time when this movie was being made, there were actual real serious crimes going on at the time in Cabrini Green. They had to have proper safety precautions and have police officers on duty. The real gangsters who were not actors give this movie a sense of realism in this movie. As usual, after the first Candyman being a big hit and success, what do? They franchise it. Confession to make, I've never seen any of the Candyman sequels and the 2021 requel. I can't make any comments on these movies since I've not seen these movies, but I did do a little research on why these sequels did not do well. I know, I'm very fun with movie franchises on my YouTube channel. I did videos on all the Batman, Superman, Halloween, Freddy Krueger, Godzilla, Hammer, Dracula, and Frankenstein movies. I guess you could say I'm in love with movie franchises, but then again, who doesn't? I also did videos on the first Rambo, Terminator, The Crow, and Jurassic Park movie. I did not cover the sequels for good reason. I've only seen a few of those sequels, and have not caught up with all of them yet. I've seen all the Terminator movies, but that's a different story. As my friend buddy Wolfman Sam says, franchise fatigue. Anyway, onwards. Candyman Farewell to the Flesh from 1995. Despite having never seen any of the Candyman sequels, I learned that Candyman Farewell to the Flesh was originally going to be a prequel to the first movie, where it explains what happened to Candyman, how he fell in love with Helen, he was killed by the villagers. Bernard Rose was originally going to direct the movie, but his idea was rejected, and the studio just wanted to make a sequel, not a prequel, and they also did not want to make a movie on an interracial couple, which did not make any sense. The way the first movie ended, where Helen could be the new urban legend, makes you wonder, how come Helen was not the new Candyman? Candyman 3 Day of the Dead from 1999. This one was not released theatrically, it was released straight to video. From what I've heard, this movie is really bad, and even Tony Todd admitted he does not like this movie. It's considered to be one of the worst horror movie sequels. There were rumors about a possible Candyman 4, but it never happened due to problems of not knowing who owned the rights to the Candyman franchise. For what I also learned from my friend Christian's YouTube video on this movie idea of a Candyman 4, it was originally going to take place in New England at an all-women's college, where Candyman disguised himself as a college professor. Right off the bat, this idea sounds stupid, lame, ridiculous, and does not make any sense. I'm not sure how true this is. There were rumors about a possible crossover movie ideas, like they originally almost wanted to do Leprechaun vs. Candyman. Again, this idea makes no sense. I don't see Leprechaun and Candyman in the same universe. It was almost a possibility of putting Candyman in a Freddy vs. Jason crossover sequel where he fights Freddy and Jason. This could have worked and made more sense than Leprechaun vs. Candyman. They almost wanted to do Candyman vs. Pinhead. This could have made sense, especially how both Candyman and Pinhead were both created by Clive Barker. But sadly, this idea never happened. Candyman 2021. The 2021 Candyman requel is produced by Jordan Peele. Again, I have not seen this one. From what I heard, Tony Todd does not show up as Candyman up until the end of the movie. I don't know if I ever bothered with this one, especially Tony Todd is not in the movie that much as Candyman up until the end. Again, use numbers. Stop being too sensitive, man. This is a sequel, not a requel. You're probably asking yourself, will I ever watch these Candyman sequels? Well, it depends on maybe if I hang out with my friends, we want to watch some crappy horror movie franchise sequels, then maybe I'll make an exception. But I'm in no rush to watch any of these Candyman sequels anytime soon. Candyman is without a doubt one of the best horror movies and best horror movies of the 90s. Despite the 90s was a hit or miss decade of horror, but Candyman proves it wrong. There were still good original fresh horror movie ideas for the time being. For a 90s horror movie, this is definitely a modern gothic horror atmosphere. Instead of castles, foggy cemeteries, or a science laboratory, it's modernized with big tall city buildings, gang and poverty, a city that is going downhill with a lot of graffiti on the walls. People think this movie is a slasher movie. It's not really a slasher movie, it's more psychological and a ghost story. It has a deeper meaning behind it on race, urban legend, class, the belief system, and the past can come back to haunt when people try to forget about the past, and that past traumas have not been healed, and that we can't erase history. And it's also a sad, tragic love story. Also, urban legend can put fear in a community. People don't want to admit the urban legend is real. I'm sure there are a lot of YouTube videos that cover this topic on Candyman and probably explain it better than I did. Candyman has a balance of grotesque and shock value. It was fresh and original, still scary and still holds up to this day. That brings us to today's video. See you next time.